You're watching PM Agenda. Thanks for your company. As we saw at the top of the show there, the Treasury and Finance Departments have released their pre-election numbers today. The independent look at how the budget bottom line is, and not much different to the figures we saw about 11 days ago from the government before calling the election campaign. With me now, the Coalition Campaign Spokesman and Shadow Assistant Treasurer, Cormann. Thank you for joining us. Do the numbers today, which aren't that different to 11 days ago, change much for the opposition?
Well, what we've received today is formal confirmation of the mess the budget is in after 6 years of Labor. What we've seen today is that the budget has indeed deteriorated by $33 billion in the just under 3 months since the budget, about $3 billion a week. And of course that is very concerning, and it comes on top of all of the deficits that we've had in previous budgets. $250 billion worth of accumulated deficits all up so far. And of course, with the government about to hit the debt limit yet again, the $300 billion legislated debt limit by December this year.
Now, just to clarify for me the process from here for the coalition. We had George Brandis this morning saying the costings were done. Joe Hockey today said you're still waiting to get some policies back from the Parliamentary Budget Office. What is the mechanics from here?
Well, I mean, the mechanics from here is that we will study the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook released by Treasury and Finance today carefully. We will, of course, review all of the costings that we've done to see what, if any, updates are required. And when all of that work has been completed through a methodical, structured, proper process, then, of course, we will release all of the costings of all of our policies. We will release all of our proposed savings measures, and, of course, what it will show is that under the coalition, the budget bottom line will be in better shape than what it would be under Labor.
Can I ask, have you made a decision on the tobacco excise? Will you back the government's decision to increase the excise?
Well, I mean, what we've made very clear is that we would not go ahead with Labor's hit on the car industry through the changes they've announced to the fringe benefits tax arrangements.
What about tobacco?
In relation to some of these other measures, you'll have to wait until we release all of our pre-election costings and savings announcements, and that will be part of that announcement.
But have you made that decision yet or not?
Well, I mean, as I said, we'll announce the decision when we're in a position to announce that decision.
What about the bank levy? Have you decided on that yet?
You can go through a whole list of measures. We'll go through a proper, structured, methodical process. We'll look at the document that was released today in its totality. We'll look at previous documents that have been released that are relevant to our considerations here. And when we've gone through all of the necessary steps, and when we've when we've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, we'll make our announcement in good time.
This one might be in the same category, but I just want to ask it anyway. The public service, you've said for a long time now that you want to reduce the size of the public service by 20,000. 11 days ago in that economics...
12,000 actually is what we said.
12,000, all right. Well, 12, my apologies, 12,000. In that statement from the government 11 days ago, they announced a higher efficiency dividend, which the unions have said is going to cost 5,000 jobs. So is your 12,000 on top of that 5,000, or does it include that 5,000?
Well, I mean, as you've said, we've made some savings announcements already. Tony Abbott, in particular, listed a whole series of savings in his speech to the National Press Club in January, and he added to that in his budget reply speech in May. The measure that you mentioned was one of those measures. We said we would reduce the size of the public service through natural attrition by 12,000, and of course that is part of the $17 billion worth of savings that we've already announced.
But is it still 12,000 on top of what the government's done already?
Well, I mean, again, I mean, you are inviting me here to do what I said we wouldn't do, and that is to trash proper process. We've said that now that the pre-election economic and fiscal outlook has been released, and the government released its economic statement, of course, 11 days ago. We will study both those documents carefully. We'll study the implications of both those documents for all of our pre-election costings, and when we're in a position to make a detailed statement in good time before the next election, we will do so.
Now, Senator, I know you've been a fierce critic of the mining tax from day one. Today's figures do show a slight increase in the revenue Treasury is expecting from it, an extra $450 million over the 4 years than it was 11 days ago. Now saying essentially nearly $4 billion will be generated from this mining tax. Do you believe that?
Well, I mean, it is very hard to believe, and I just point out that, you know, the government and Treasury has got those forecasts very wrong in the past. I mean, in the lead up to the last election, essentially what we were told was that the mining tax all the way to 2016-17 would rise to $26.5 billion. That has been significantly downgraded. We know that in 2012-13, instead of the $4 billion revenue estimate that the government released in the lead up to the last election, they said at budget time it was just $200 million, which was 95% less than the original forecast.
The difficulty for you now is Treasury is saying this $4 billion from the mining tax. If you find that hard to believe, as you say, and don't factor it in as part of your costings, that's going to leave you open to some criticism.
Well, sorry, the final point I was going to make is that we also, of course, now know since last week that even some of the prepayments in mining tax that were made in 2012-13 are now being refunded by the government. So out of the $200 million, which was just 5% of the original mining tax revenue estimate, the government has actually started to refund some of that money to companies like Rio Tinto. So, look, I mean, we do have some question marks there, but obviously, I mean, this is all part of the process we're going to be going through over the next couple of days and the next week or so. And this is, of course, part of the methodical and structured process of assessing all of the implications of the information that was released today.
Matthias Cormann, before we go, I've got to ask you this. Do you think Fiona Scott, Liberal candidate in Lindsay, has sex appeal?
Look, I mean, that was clearly a light-hearted comment by Tony Abbott today. I'm sure that he meant no offence by it. I've campaigned with Fiona Scott in Lindsay. She's a hard-working representative for her community. She'll make a fine Member of Parliament for the seat of Lindsay, and I hope that the people of Lindsay will give her their confidence so that she can be their representative here in Canberra.
That's probably the answer Tony Abbott should have given. Was it a bit of a silly comment, do you think?
Well, I mean, as I said, I mean, this was just a light-hearted comment, which I'm sure was not meant with any offence.
All right. Matthias Cormann, thank you very much for joining us this afternoon.
Always good to be here.
We'll take a break.